Okay.
Hello again, Mr. Palmisano.
Hello.
At any point in 2012, did Edison ask Areva, Westinghouse, or any of its other consultants to perform work on the development of a long-term repair or replacement plan?
We asked several consultants, such as Areva or Westinghouse, for ideas, suggestions on long-term plans, and MHI was part of those discussions, listening to them.
And those were in those informal meetings for which there's no particular recorded documentation, as you explained to Mr. Shapson?
Those were in those meetings. They may have provided PowerPoint slides, but there were no meeting minutes per se.
And in your accounting, do you segregate consultant costs that were directed to work on that long-term repair and replacement plan, or are they all lumped together with all of the work the consultants did?
Objection, Foundation.
Overruled.
I'm not an accounting specialist. We segregate costs for the long-term repair group separate from the restart or short-term return to service group.
So would it be reasonable then for me to expect that any payments made to consultants on the long-term repair work would show up under your long-term repair group?
Again, I'm not an accounting guy, so I can't answer that.
Do you have a sense of what dollar amounts were involved regarding that work you requested of the consultants related to the long-term repair plan?
Not in my memory, no.
Compared to the short-term plan, was it a significant amount in your judgment or a small amount?
It would be a smaller amount than what would be allocated to the restart or the short-term group.
Would you care to associate to the nearest 10% estimate?
Not without looking at a 2012 financial report, no.
At any point in 2012, did Edison do a cost-benefit analysis of a long-term repair and replacement plan?
To my knowledge, we have not done a cost-benefit of a long-term repair or replacement plan.
And in your position at Songs, would you expect that you'd know if such an analysis had been done?
I would expect I would provide technical information to it.
So you would have been aware if such an analysis had been done?
Again, I'm not aware that an analysis has been done, but I would be. Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Palmisano.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Sullivan, is Mr. Lutz, it's going to be... Okay, so Mr. Lutz.
Thank you. I just have a couple more questions for you. I'd like to take a look at this document that we received yesterday called SEE 25.
One moment, please. I do not have 25 in my binder, folks.
Here's...
Oh, thank you. Just one moment, please. Okay, I've got it in front of me. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Are you familiar with this document?
Generally, yes, I am.
Okay. I notice on the front cover it says dated 1/30/2013, and I don't want to try to diverge from our restrictions on talking about 2012, but I imagine this was something that was worked on in 2012 as well. Isn't that true?
I did make a representation, Your Honor, yesterday. This was the document that Mr. Perez happened to have with him. It indicates it's revision 8, so it is an evolution of a document that was worked on in 2012.
And this is the testimony that was in the record yesterday.
Okay, great. When was revision 1 created?
I don't have that date with me.
Okay. Do you know approximately when it probably got started?
We started on the long-term preservation plan in the summertime, in June or July. I just don't know whether Rev 1 was issued in August or September.
Is this part of the July 23rd plan to also the long-term restart group? Was that the same group that started this?
No, this is a separate group under the site vice president responsible for maintaining and operating the current assets. So this is a plan, again, to preserve Unit 3 in this extended layup condition.
Okay. Please return to page 9 of this document. Okay, if you could look at the second to the last bullet, it says Unit 2, one of the assumptions, because that's the title of the whole page. One of the assumptions is that Unit 2 will restart in 2012. Now, why is that an important assumption?
At the time, and this goes back to when the plan was originally developed, starting, let's say, in the summer of 2012, and it's an important assumption in terms of how we prioritize the work for the plant staff, the operators, the maintenance people. Underlying this assumption would be decisions that I talked about earlier, maintaining Unit 2 in a readiness to restart with some other activities to maintain appropriate conditions for the systems. So that's an assumption that this team started with, that Unit 2 will be dealt with in a certain way under our normal processes, and Unit 3 would be dealt with for preservation under this plan.
Okay, so maybe that's an obsolete statement now that this is revision 8 in 2013. Wouldn't you agree with that?
Well, the statement is certainly not applicable. I would generalize it in terms of we are maintaining Unit 2 in a readiness to restart pending NRC approval. So fundamentally, it translates to the same thing.
One assumption that I guess you'd have to assume is in here, but it's not stated as explicitly, is that you intend to eventually restart Unit 3. Does that make sense to you?
What would make sense to me is this maintains the option for the company to restart Unit 3. It protects the asset, keeps it in a condition. If you look at the assumption, I think it's the fourth bullet down, approximately 2 months for recovery from layup prior to startup. So it's important to maintain the option until final decisions are made. So this protects the asset, protects the interest of the ratepayers and the shareholders during that time frame.
Okay, thank you. Now, earlier today, you stated that, and I'm going to try to quote this, I don't have a transcript, that you had, quote, a specific decision-making plan regarding the restart, and you were part of the restart decision. Do you recall making that kind of a statement?
Yeah, we were talking about the restart decision for Unit 2 coming out of the refueling outage and how it was affected by the steam generator findings.
Right. Now, I know you're a technical guy and you may not deal with costs, but in your decision-making plan, do you consider the costs of different options?
This decision-making was around whether it was safe and appropriate to start up the Unit 2 reactor and power plant under the current license and tech specs with what we knew. So that's not a cost evaluation, it's a safety and a compliance evaluation.
So were you given a directive to restart Unit 2 at all costs?
Oh, absolutely not.
Well then, who makes a decision about whether or not you should do it if you don't have cost as a consideration?
You need to separate a restart decision coming out of a refueling outage. So again, let's take the context. So we're completing a planned refueling outage. We have some initial adverse findings on the Unit 3 steam generators. At the time we made the decision not to restart Unit 2, this goes back to the March time frame, we did not have the indication of tube-to-tube wear in Unit 2, but we did feel to be safe and conservative, we would not restart Unit 2 at the time. So that's a decision based on being safe, being conservative, and technically acceptable. That's the criteria there. It is not a longer-term decision.
Well, in my questioning yesterday, I tried to ask you if you, at Edison, consider different options. And you said that you never did that. You never did consider different options as to what the costs would be. You said that maybe they did it at a higher level, but you weren't aware of it.
Objection, misstates testimony.
So is that true or not?
Sustained. I think that's a misstatement. You could ask him what he did say.
Yeah, what did you say about that?
Perhaps we can read it back out of the transcript. We've had a lot of dialogue over the last 2 days.
Well, let's not do that because I don't want to have to try to dig that out. But let's ask the question again if you don't mind. Was there a decision-making process that included cost and various options, including everything on the table, and I actually saw that phrase in one of the documents where everything was on the table. Was everything put on the table for your decision-making process, and including cost?
With respect to Unit 2 and startup and filing the confirmatory action letter in 2012, cost was not factored into my knowledge in the discussions that I was in.
So they said basically restart at any cost.
That's not what anybody said.
Well, if cost was not an issue, then you were given a directive to restart and you didn't consider any costs?
Objection. It
What did you just say?
testimony.
You continue to recharacterize his testimony. His testimony is what it is. You can make your argument about what you think he means or what you might infer about a management decision, but it's not appropriate to rephrase his testimony and attribute it to him.
Okay. Who at Edison, Southern California Edison, does consider cost?
What context?
In terms of the restart plans and these two units that were disabled in this recent outage, Unit 2 and Unit 3 are both offline right now, and many decisions have been made, including putting Unit 3 in preservation mode, getting Unit 2 ready for restart.
I think your question was the first part of that sentence, so why don't we...
Well, there was an objection over here, so that's what I'm...
Right, but you moved to the... And then you then stated a relevant question, but then you kept going. So
Okay, now...
I want to try to...
Who at Southern California Edison does consider costs with regard to those things I mentioned?
And the things you mentioned with regard to restart or long-term preservation.
Yes.
The company has formed a team to evaluate someone's long-term future and look at different options and the costs of different options. Part of this is preparation for general rate case materials, so I'm aware that those teams are formed. I don't have specific names.
Did that happen in 2012?
The teams were formed in 2012.
Thank you.
Okay, so there were some teams formed, and did you interact with the teams?
I provide technical information to the team.
So if we're having a proceeding here regarding costs that were in decisions-making of Edison, I'm a bit confused unless there's another witness that's scheduled to talk to the decisions that were made, maybe from those decision-making teams. Is there someone that we can identify that we could bring in and answer some of these questions?
Objection.
I think...
Form of the question.
Is there someone, what can I do to fix it?
Well, I'm confused. Maybe I'm confused. What I thought you asked was what was going on. Was there somebody in Edison in 2012 that was making cost decisions? And I think the testimony was yes as to the long-term eventual outcome of Song's units. He's trying. It sounds like what you're trying to do is find out whether that kind of decision making was concluded in 2012. Is that?
Well, there were some decisions that were made in 2012 regarding these things, and I would assume, I would hope, this is just my own personal hope, that they would include costs in their decision-making process.
All right, so you don't like, I must have misunderstood your question. Why don't you try your question again?
Okay, I'm sorry, I'm not an attorney. How about this question? Who can testify to cost considerations in 2012?
I'm not familiar with a name that I can provide you.
Okay, maybe we can talk about that on a
Mr.
different
Weissman,
time.
would that be Mr. Snow, Mr. Worden?
I'm really not sure, Your Honor.
Okay.
Is there a way that we can identify a person who could answer these questions? Because I think that's the whole reason that we're here.
Well, I think that what the testimony has been is that for the Unit 2 restart, that the cost, you said that wasn't, the cost was not influential in the decision to develop a restart plan. Is that what
That
you
is
said?
correct. The cost was not a dominant factor.
So that takes care of 2 for 2012, unless there were additional cost evaluations being done later in the year that led to expenditures or influenced expenditures later in the year relative to the restart plan.
And those I am not familiar with.
Okay, for Unit 3, where you have testified that there were teams put together to look at the long-term repair or other options. Did that team reach any conclusions that influenced operational decisions and expenditures as to Unit 3 during 2012?
So the team that I'm referring to is the team I'm responsible for, working with MHI to evaluate the options. Okay. We have not reached any conclusions in 2012.
Is cost a factor in those discussions?
Not at the level that my team is at. My team is focused on the technical options.
Do you know whether cost is a factor in other levels of consideration?
Yes, I believe cost is a factor in other teams formed in the company above Songs to evaluate the longer term.
Okay. Has that team reached any conclusions that have impacted expenditures regarding Unit 3 in 2012?
The team has not reached any conclusions in terms of repair options. What we have done in 2012 is minimize expenditures related to Unit 3 pending MHI providing an acceptable solution.
Okay. Perhaps this advanced you a little farther down the road.
Okay, that's, okay, maybe we can process that other issue later. The other options, in my mind, it would be possible for the company to say, don't restart Unit 2. I don't know if this is in the record, but I know that the numbers are. Unit 3 had 807 tubes plugged, and Unit 2 had 510. And other reactors and plants had very few tubes plugged in comparison. I'm looking here at one 16 years old at Indian Point, and it's only 14 tubes plugged. And we can put this into
What's your question, Mr. Lutz? How does that tie in?
It would have been possible for the company to say, let's not start Unit 2. I'm thinking about who made the decision. You're saying cost was not a factor in pursuing the Unit 2 restart. But somebody made the decision and said, restart Unit 2, didn't they?
We certainly made a decision that it would be in the best interest of the customers and the company to restart Unit 2 when it was deemed safe to restart.
And he's asking you, do you know who made that decision?
Yeah, exactly, thank you.
Well, certainly at the chief nuclear officer level, that decision.
Yeah, who would that be?
Mr. Pete Dietrich.
Dietrich. Okay.
Is Mr. Dietrich going to be offered as a witness to testify about this?
No.
No. Okay. Why isn't Mr. Dietrich going to be able to answer our questions regarding this question about the decisions to go forward with pursuing restart of Unit 2?
Objection, Likes Foundation. Why is he asking this witness these questions about our legal judgments about which witnesses to call in this hearing?
Sustained.
Okay, well...
He's given testimony about his understanding of the decision-making process and its limitations. Mm-hmm. He said that cost was not an issue. I'm not sure where you're going with this witness about what another executive at Edison might or might not think about an operational decision.
Well, here's how I look at it, if I may.
I would just like to ask, so in considering Edison's decision-making in 2012 relative to expenditures it made, we are not to be able to hear from one of the people that was involved in the decision about the cost associated with their action?
So, Ms. Sullivan, did you submit a data request asking who was involved in this decision during the discovery process?
No, I didn't.
Okay.
But
and so that's what happens during discovery. We don't come to the hearing and start to identify witnesses. It may be that you can get to this witness at another stage in this proceeding. It may be that Edison doesn't have any evidence in the record on this point, and you can argue it. But the discovery issues start with the parties asking what they want to know. And if you wanted to know what executive was involved and you wanted to inquire about that, that would be a normal discovery. And I understand you're kind of new to the process.
So, excuse me, Judge, you're saying that a vice president of the company, when it's found that he does not have this knowledge, that we're not entitled to ask for another representative of the company who can provide that information?
An evidentiary hearing is not a free-for-all to call anybody and everybody that you think you might want to ask a question to. This is an evidentiary proceeding in which there is certain phases that develop the record. It starts with the discovery phase, in which an ordinary kind of inquiry would be, if this is something you think is relevant, would say something like, who was involved in the decision to adopt a restart plan? What kind of criteria was used? Who made that decision? That's sort of the ordinary discovery that would happen if that's a line of inquiry that you were interested in and was within scope. It's not something that you come here and you have a witness who's responded and you say, but I want to know more. If he is in a position to respond as to what factors were involved, he's given you his information. If they don't have they've not chosen to bring a witness forward to say something else, it's up to the other parties.
What is our recourse when Edison is not forthcoming?
Your recourse is to make appropriate discovery requests prior to the hearing.
Can I say something? You know,
That seems like to me, Your Honor, that just rewards stonewalling.
That's litigation, Ms. Sullivan. The stonewalling is if they don't get a request, they don't have to answer it.
So you're saying that that's the purpose of this commission?
The purpose of this commission is to provide a forum. Excuse me, Ms. Sullivan. The purpose of this proceeding is to provide a set of procedures to provide order to fact gathering and to allow testimony to come forward and to be tested by cross-examination. There are avenues for obtaining information from other parties, and the parties who are coming here to participate are expected to conform with the existing procedures. You can ask whatever you want in a data request. I can't guarantee you that you'll get an answer that you like, but you are entitled to submit data requests. That's the ordinary discovery mechanism in this type of regulatory litigation at this agency. So if you haven't asked that question now, prior to now, there is testimony in the record that is responsive. It may not be to your satisfaction. You're free to argue that you think they didn't make their case, that they didn't provide an alternative, they should have done that. You're free to argue that. But you're not in a position to start asking for new witnesses to be produced at the evidentiary hearing. It's simply too late.
So we would just like to confirm what we heard, which is that the chief nuclear officer, Peter Dietrich, made the decision about restarting Unit 2. Is that correct?
The answer?
Go right ahead.
Yes, with input and advice from several of us, he's the final decision authority on restarting Unit 2.
Did he take cost into account in that decision?
You would have to ask him. Our discussions were around whether it was safe, whether it was conservative, and whether it was appropriate under the license.
I got to say,
the appropriate question is, did you have any discussions with Mr. Dietrich about cost or other factors relative to the decision?
I did not have discussions with him about the cost of restarting Unit 2.
That's within Mr. Palisano's knowledge.
Okay, how about this one?
And then we're going to...
Are there any other witnesses that have been identified at the hearing already that did discuss with Mr. Dietrich costs so that we wouldn't have to get another witness?
Objection lacks foundation. How would he know?
I don't know, I'm just trying to get it to happen. You know, here's the thing, is that
Okay.
we expect a person from Edison to know these things, and a person is developed that apparently knows nothing about costs, which is the subject of the hearing. I
There's
just can't
been a
even
great
believe it
deal of
happened.
information about costs. Now, Mr. Lutz, I'm going to give you one more question. We're going to move on to another topic, and you've got one question left, and then let's move on.
Okay. SE is responsible for providing the witnesses, is that, I mean, you can choose which witnesses? I'm sorry, I'm just trying to figure it out, I'm new. But you get to choose which witnesses?
You know, I don't want to spend evidentiary hearing time explaining the rules of practice and procedure. I've given you a basic overview. There's a discovery process, there's a written testimony process, there are a number of procedures that are available to pursue responses to discovery if you think they're inadequate, but you have to start by making the request.
But we're right at the point of getting to the crux of this matter, and we're getting a stonewall here in a block.
I'm not sure what the crux of the matter
Well, we'd
is.
like to know if cost was considered, and if it wasn't,
It's been asked and answered several times.
no, we don't, no one can answer that question.
Then you
person
can
isn't here.
make that argument. That's an argument.
Okay. I guess I have no further questions.
Okay, Ms. Venskis, I know that you would like to make a request for additional cross, which I am not inclined to grant. Can you give me a very brief sense of what the substance would be?
Yes, I wanted to ask a couple questions following up on the mutually agreeable to MHI and SCE on the 70% power restart plan. I wanted to ask a couple questions about NRC repair plan approved, if at all, in 2012. I wanted to ask a question about certainty of return to service for the two units.
I think there's been testimony on both of those that there is no final NRC action and there's no certainty.
Well, the question was going to be for the witness whether or not,
Whether
whether or not in his knowledge, if he felt that there was any likelihood of restart approval by the end of 2012.
as of December 31st.
Yeah.
And how, as it relates to expenditures on December 31st?
As it relates to expenditures in 2012.
What he knew on the last day of the year, how does that inform the facts of what he knew prior in the rest of the year?
Okay, I could ask October.
You can have one question. Go ahead, one question. Pick a point in time and ask him what his view was.
Can I ask a couple questions about the mutually agreeable first?
Fast.
Okay, what if I take until 5 after?
Go.
Okay. You testified that Unit 2 70% power restart plan was mutually agreeable to MHI and SCE, is that correct?
That is correct.
Is this mutual acceptance memorialized in writing?
I would have to check. I don't know off the top of my head.
Could you find out for me, please?
Is that a data request?
Okay, I'm going to move on and then we can talk about that, because I only have 1 more minute to ask some questions. Prior to, did SCE have an NRC approved repair plan at any time for Unit 3 in 2012?
No.
Did SCE have an NRC approved repair plan at any time for Unit 2 in 2012?
Are you asking about a restart plan as opposed to a repair plan?
Okay, restart plan.
No.
Okay. Repair plan?
No.
Okay. And prior to January 1st, 2013, did you know with certainty whether Unit 2 would ever be returned to service?
The question is, would Unit 2 ever be returned to service? Can you clarify that?
Okay. So, did you have certainty in 2012 at any time that Unit 2 would be returned to service at some time in the future?
Not limited to 2012. I'm just trying to clarify if you're right. We are
In
confident.
2012.
Be returned to service in 2012. That's what I'm trying to clarify.
Okay, what I'm trying to understand is in 2012, did you ever think to yourself that Unit 2 will be returned to service for sure?
Yes, we were confident in 2012 that Unit 2 would be returned to service eventually.
Okay, what about with respect to Unit 3?
Unit 3, we had deferred Unit 3 restart, I think, till the fourth quarter of 2013 and 2012.
Okay, and from SCE's, or from your perspective, strike that, in your professional opinion, in 2012, what was the percentage of likeliness that Unit 2 would be returned to service at some time in the future?
Oh, I think it's very likely, or high percentage, that Unit 2 will return to service sometime in the future.
Right, but in 2012, did you feel that way?
Yes.
Okay, and then what about with respect to Unit 3? As you thought about it in 2012 at any time?
As I thought about it in 2012, it is likely that Unit 3 can be returned to service.
Is it more likely that, in your professional opinion, is it less likely that Unit 3 will be returned to service than Unit 2?
Let me flip it around. It is more likely that Unit 2 will be returned to service because it has not been damaged.
Okay. And
Final?
a final question. If you did not know with certainty as of December 31st, 2012, whether Unit 2 will ever be returned to service, in your opinion, was it reasonable for SCE to maintain staffing and systems and readiness to return Unit 2 to service throughout 2012?
Absolutely.
Okay.
It was very reasonable. It was prudent. It would have been imprudent not to.
Okay, thank you.
All right, before I give you your chance for some redirect, I have a couple of questions. Do you know whether there is a difference in the repair cost, for purposes of the Unit 2 restart, would there be a difference in the repair costs that you would incur or did incur in 2012 in planning for a restart at 70% versus 100% restart?
There would be practically very little difference in the actual cost, probably in some of the analysis we would do.
Meaning the analysis would be
The analysis
more or
would
less?
be more analysis if we tried to justify 100%.
Okay. And if I were looking at, I know this wasn't, most of this Edison Exhibit 10 wasn't yours, but my question is general. You have, would it be fair to say that if I see inspection costs under the Unit 2 incremental O&M for steam generator inspection and repair activities, that these would be for restart-related activities?
That is a fair assumption.
And if I were to look at identified expenditures on the Unit 3 incremental O&M for steam generator inspection and repair, would it be fair to assume that these would be related to a long-term repair or to preservation?
No, they're more likely related to gathering enough information to understand the cause and to support the Unit 2 restart. Because we stipulated with the NRC we would understand the cause of Unit 3 prior to restarting Unit 2. So virtually all the inspection costs in Unit 3 were to understand the cause, the differences, and support the Unit 2 restart.
Okay. Do you have an opinion as to the Unit 2 incremental O&M for steam generator, how much of these expenditures are a direct result of attempts to conform to the NRC's confirmatory action letter process with Edison to get Unit 2 into a restart position?
Without looking at the specific spreadsheet, the expenditures in January and February for steam generators for Unit 2 would have been the normal expenditures for the outage. March and beyond are more likely to be related to the Unit 3 problem and the confirmatory action letter in place on Unit 2.
After March 1?
Roughly after March. That's how I would divide it.
Roughly after March 1, that's...
The costs would be related to Unit 2 restart and the confirmatory action letter.
Okay. All right, and the last question I had is relative to SE 25. And this is just you may not know, but this is an accounting question. You listed this lists the core team members.
What page are you on?
I'm on page, there.
Of the unnumbered pages.
Page 4.
Yes,
So this lists the core team members in this Unit 3 plan. Do you know how the human resources costs, the staffing costs, the benefits packages and so forth are recorded as it relates to the requests, the 2012 expenses that have been identified in this proceeding?
No, I did not know that.
Okay. That's all I have. Mr. Judge Dudley?
Yeah, one quick question for you, Mr. Dietrich. Earlier today, we talked about several letters. Palmisano. I'm reading one of the letters with Mr. Dietrich, which is where I'm going. So the subject of those letters was long-term repair and replacement options between Edison and MHI. The letters in late December discuss options for long-term repair. Are you aware if any of those options the initial steps were implemented in late December of 2012?
Can you clarify, what do you mean by the initial steps?
For example, Exhibit SE16 has, most of the details are redacted, but that letter appears to present steps for the 5.5-year repair plan option. And in one of the attachments to that exhibit, I believe it's attachment 2, there's a project management Gantt chart that begins in December of 2012. So my question is, did Edison take the initial steps there?
What we have done as of the end of 2012 is we have worked with Mitsubishi to develop options, which they are working on options 1 through 4. We have not accepted or authorized any specific option. We've given them our criteria to help them narrow down their recommendation. So the only work we have done is to evaluate materials as they have presented it, and that's documented in those letters. Mitsubishi may have done some things on their own. I think in some of these they allude to mock-ups and things back in Japan to determine feasibility, but they are doing that on their own initiative to help them develop options. So I can tell you, we've not initiated the early steps of any one option.
So the answer was no.
The answer is no, yes, ma'am.
Thank you, Mr. Palmisano.
Okay. Mr. Weissman, do you have any redirect?
Very, very quickly, Your Honor. Thank you. Mr. Palmisano, first turn to Exhibit 16, please.
I have that.
There was some questioning about the page 3, fourth paragraph, the 5.5-year time frame. Could you clarify your understanding of what that 5.5-year period relates to?
Yeah, and I may, if I misspoke earlier, I want to clarify. This says Mitsubishi currently estimates the schedule for both of these options, and in parentheses, design, manufacture, delivery of either replacement tube bundles or entire steam generators. So this is what would be option 3 and 4. So this is the replacement of the entire steam generator or the significant portion. So the 5.5 years refers to that, not to option 1 of thicker AVBs.
Thank you.
Not to option 1 of...
Thicker AVBs.
Thank you.
Slow down. Yes, ma'am.
Is that it?
In February 2012, did you expect that Edison would spend $130 million on inspection and repair in 2012?
No, I did not.
In February 2012, how long did you expect it would take to return Unit 2 to service?
In February 2012, again, before the discovery of the Unit 3 issues, I would expect we would have been on our normal schedule for a restart after 60 to 70 days.
When was tube-to-tube wear or possible tube-to-tube wear discovered in Unit 2?
In Unit 2 was discovered April 10th of 2012.
If you didn't have a cost-effectiveness study, why did you incur all these costs to restart?
Well, at the time, especially early in the year, we were faced with a decision to restart Unit 2 from a normal refueling outage with acceptable steam generator results. And even after the Unit 3 data became apparent, Unit 2 appeared to be vulnerable but not significantly affected, and we felt it was reasonable to restart on a 60-day time frame after NRC approval. So it did not appear, it appeared to be obvious that the cost-effective solution for shareholders and ratepayers would be to return the unit to service.
Did that change at any time in 2012?
No, it did not.
February 2012, why did you spend money for restart if you didn't have a final plan from Mitsubishi for a long-term repair?
Well, again, in February 2012, we were just getting the data on the Unit 3 steam generators. In the March timeframe, we recognized the significance. But again, let's separate returning the unit to service safely, producing 70% of its output is still valuable to the customers, to the grid, for energy supply and reliability. We felt that was an appropriate decision to make.
And did that change at any time during the year?
No, we still feel that way.
That's all I have, Your Honor.
Mr. Eastman? Then the scope of the redirect.
Relates to his response to Mr. Weissman on the acceptability of the wear found in Unit 2 after the Unit 2 RFO inspections, and specifically the acceptability of the wear found at the retainer bars of Unit 2.
I don't think I asked that question.
I didn't hear that.
I think he asked the general question about the acceptability of wear in Unit 2 after the RFO inspection. I'm trying to narrow my question in the interest of time to the acceptability of wear at the retainer bars in Unit 2.
I don't remember asking a question about the acceptability of the wear rate.
Well, I believe that was Mr. Palmisano's answer, that the wear discovered in Unit 2 was considered acceptable, and they were going to restart based on their normal RFO process.
And your question is?
Did he consider the wear at the retainer bar in Unit 2 after the inspection to be acceptable?
The wear itself was not acceptable. All the tubes that were affected were plugged and removed from service, so the retainer bar going forward as the plant operator would not be an issue for the plant. So my comment is that wear was identified, cause understood, tubes removed from service, and it is acceptable to restart.
In an RFO context?
That is correct.
Thank you.
Mr. Friedman?
Thank you. You were asked by counsel about the 5.5-year timeline for options 3 and 4, and I just want to clarify, did that 5.5-year timeline include transportation of the new components and installation of those components into Units 2 and 3?
I need to tell you that's an estimate by Mitsubishi, and we have not accepted that proposal, nor have we finished reviewing the material, so I can't answer that.
Did Mitsubishi's estimate, as they provided it to you, include transportation installation, or was it simply for design and fabrication?
I believe it was, delivery and installation. But
Are
again,
you sure?
I believe. I am not sure, because I have not reviewed that yet.
Would that be something that might be available in the documents that were provided by Mitsubishi that are in evidence in this proceeding?
How does that help us for December?
Your Honor, I'm just trying to clarify the statement that was made. My belief is that it's not accurate.
Okay.
So, if that's your testimony, Mr. Palmisano, we'll leave
My
it there.
testimony is I don't know firmly what it includes, because I haven't reviewed it. That's my answer to you.
Thank you.
Okay. I believe we are concluding.
I have recalls.
Within the context of the redirect only,